Alright, hey guys, what's up and welcome back to the BFS Fishing channel. And in this video, we're going to be going over the Histar Aurora Air. I just picked this up at the summer sale event, but it is still on sale for around $30 to $35 on AliExpress as a choice item. Now, I am running into, I think, some issues with the reel, and so I'm going to go ahead and do a teardown because I didn't do that with the first reel that I bought, which had way more issues than this one. I mean, take a listen to this. This is the first version. I mean, that little grinding sound, I don't know what that is, and I'm not going to bother looking at that reel. This one is markedly smoother. However, the drag clicker is a little bit on the rough side, so we'll see if we can't, take a look at that. And then also, for some reason, I think that the worm shaft was shimmed improperly, so I'm going to show you how to fix that, as well as potentially fixing this issue with the handle knob. So there's two ways that you can go about that. You can just completely replace the handle with something, something like this, a handle from Gomexis, and I don't think it's going to be the same length. I think this one right here is an 80 millimeter. This one is probably closer to like an 85 millimeter handle, but if you just do a straight up replacement, the Gomexis is typically shimmed a lot better. And, thin knobs, I don't really like thin knobs. I prefer these slightly bigger, fatter knobs. But anyways, I'm going to show you how to, if you really want to keep these, then you can fix these. And we're just going to go ahead and get started with that. Okay, so I thought that these had handle knob covers, but they do not. And it looks like they're using Torx bit. So I've got out my Torx driver, and this is a T8. And so we're going to go ahead and take off one of these handles, and I'll show you how to go ahead and shim these. So on this, there doesn't really seem to be a cover of any sort on the end of the handle knob. Usually on other knobs, you'll see something like that. And what's kind of interesting is that you'll notice that they're using bushings in this. And oddly, this one is red. But the thing that I'm looking at is basically, you can see that the grease on here is a kind of a translucent white. And I noticed that the grease is the same color as what was on the spool itself. And I'm wondering if they're switching to a silicone grease, which is actually kind of nice to see, because before they had been using like a blue color grease, which always dries out. And I've just never had a really good experience with that. So, because this actually has no washers underneath that bushing. So we're going to go ahead and shim that bushing with a few handle knob shims. So I'll be right back. All right, so it looks like I'm running a little bit low on these, but we're going to try this out. So what you'll need is some of these washers that are very, very thin. And so if you look, I've got a 0.1, a 0.2, and a 0.3 size. So we're going to have to find out what the right size is. So let's try out both of these. So that'll make a 0.3, and then we'll go ahead and put this bushing back on, and then the handle knob itself. And unfortunately, that does make the handle knob sit quite proud compared to the other version, or the other side. And so we will go ahead and try to downsize the washer size. All right, so right now what we've got is basically a 0.3 millimeter thick washer. And so we're gonna try going with a 0.1. All right, so we're gonna put the 0.2s back, and we'll try out the 0.1. And this is kind of what you have to go through when you're shimming handle knobs. And I'll give you the size dimension on these right now. So the outer width is going to be a 7, and the inner width, really quite hard to pick these up with gloves on, but inner width is going to be a 4. All right, so outer diameter is going to be a 7, and inner diameter is going to be a 4. So right now we're using a 0.1 millimeter thick washer, and we'll see if that, yeah, so there's no gap now. So we'll try putting the screw back, and remember to seat your bushing on top. There we go. Drop that screw right in there. Sometimes it is a little bit of a pain to kind of get those screws to reseat and re-screw back down. And if this one is successful, no, it's not. Yeah, it's a little bit better. But you can see how it's starting to now bind, which, yeah, it's most likely what'll be better is replacing these with bearings flat out, or just replacing the handle altogether. And so, you know, if you want to shim these, then that's the way you do them, basically with these 7x4 millimeter washers of varying thicknesses, you know, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And I'll put a link to where you can pick these up on AliExpress for quite cheap. But that's the way that you go ahead and shim your handle. But now I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the teardown, and let's see if we can't get into the reel so that we can start working on trying to shim the worm shaft properly so that we have a little bit of a better line lay and have the line guide actually move correctly and equally inside the spool. All right, so went ahead and removed the lock washer. That's just basically a Phillips or a posi drive. Whoops. So that's just basically a posi drive. Then we've got our 8mm or 10mm nut. Let me measure that because I always get mixed up whether it's an 8 or a 10. This is a 10 actually, so make me eat my own words. Okay, nut comes off. Looks like there is one washer there. So we'll go ahead and put that down. The handle will then come off, and we'll go set that aside there. Drag star just comes off with a spring. Here's that spring right there. And then this is why I have the spool still in, so I can keep my thumb on that while I unscrew that spring nut. And in this occasion, there's going to be a washer that's coming off with the nut, but the washer is there, and so we'll keep that in order. Then we have two spring washers, which if you look, they've got them in the same direction. Now I wouldn't advise of that. I would always want my spring washers to be opposing each other. That way you're not, you know, getting no resistance when you tighten your drag star and then all of a sudden a lot of resistance. You want they act kind of like a spring because of the way that they're bent opposing each other, and you slowly squish them. Whereas if they're in the same direction, then you have less space taken up this way, and then all of a sudden it's like double the resistance. So you want to have them opposing each other. And so now we can go ahead and open this, take off the side plate. We'll go ahead and set that aside because we're not messing with the side plate. Here is the spool. I've actually gone ahead and kind of wiped up some of the excess grease that was already there, which, you know, I always like to do because during hot days, you know, that grease kind of starts to melt a little bit and then can run all over the place. All right, so now we're going to start getting into the reel itself, and it does look like they're using Torx bits. So there's one Torx right there. Let's see. Oh, handle shaft bearing came out. Another Torx, a Torx, and then there's one that's going to be going through the frame. There's a little hole for it, a service hole. And so we'll go ahead and find the right size for the Torx bit, and then we'll try to take those off. And I'm hoping that it's a T8, just like the handle, but it is not. It is smaller than a T8. So I'm going to look for a T6 or a T7. It's going to be the T6. So you need a T6 and a T8 in order to start servicing this reel. So I'm going to take off the outside screw first. And be careful when you're unscrewing and also screwing these screws back in, because these are screws that are going directly into a carbon fiber or carbon fiber reinforced plastic side plate, which means that the threads are going to be very, very coarse. But also, once you start stripping that material, you are basically done with that. So we're going to go ahead and take out the screw that is required to go through the frame first. And hopefully you guys can kind of see that. screw seam's kind of fixed in there. I'm gonna use my tweezers to see if I can't wiggle it out. And it looks like those screws are very much the same. So that's good. That makes things a little bit easier. Hopefully the rest of the screws are also going to be the same. And I'm going to the next one, also the same. So that's great to see. Makes life a lot easier for us because there's no size differences. And the last one, also the same. Great. Okay, so hopefully that's all of them. Unfortunately, we don't have a breakdown or a schematic of this reel. All right, there's the spool tension shaft and then the pinion bearing. So we'll go ahead and put the side plate right there. And then we're into the inner portion of the reel. It looks like the AR bearing just came out, which this might be the reason why there is a little bit of play, because the AR bearing just fell out of the side plate itself. So when I put it back in, I may try to put, something to help kind of wedge it in there and press fit it in there a little bit better. It looks like they're using a clear translucent grease on the rest of this, which is great to see. That means most likely they're using a silicone-based grease, which is very nice and awesome to see. I'm going to go ahead and take out the pinion and the yoke as well as the springs. And we'll get a really quick look at that. So there's the yoke, and it does use a little metal support, which is nice. There is a little bit of a shoulder on this pinion where it mates with the spool pin, which is great to see. The machining looks fairly clean. And hopefully you guys are able to see that. So that's also good to see because the reel does feel a lot smoother than the previous version. The previous version, for some weird reason, just did not sit well with me. Okay, so here is the main gear. Here's the anti-reverse ratchet. Very well greased. Here is one of the drag washers, which is also well greased. And this is, it kind of looks like a bakelite material, which is, I have seen it on some reels. I prefer to see a carbon drag washer rather than a bakelite, but it is what it is. If you really want to switch it out, you can. You just have to get the size. And then let's take a look at what the clicker mechanism is like, because I have never seen anything quite like this. Here is the pressure plate, and a pin just fell out. Okay. All right, so it is a flute ring and pin style system, and they do have a carbon drag washer on this side, so that's nice. And can this come out? It doesn't really want to come out. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it then. But what you can see, or what you can't see, is that the inner portion of this plastic ring, this white nylon ring, is actually fluted out. And so it's kind of like cupped out. And this pressure plate has that hole right there where this little pin goes, and the pin sits inside and is pushed outwards by a spring inside that little hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in. And so you can see right there, that's what the pin looks like. And the pin kind of gets pushed in and then pushes against those little fluted cutout half circles in the drag clicker ring, this white nylon ring here. Looks like an aluminum gear. Nothing too crazy, but that is the whole drag clicker mechanism. And if you want to make your drag clicker sound a little bit louder, you could take out this pin, remove that spring, and kind of stretch it just a little bit, and then put it back in. Of course, it'll impart more force on the pin to push outwards against that flute ring. And if you wanted a little bit quieter, you could probably take out that spring and kind of compress it just a little bit. Now, I don't know how much you need to compress it or stretch it before the spring itself actually fails. And so I'm not actually going to do anything with that. Over time, it will start to get a little bit quieter. And so I'm just going to leave it as is. Okay, but let's keep going because we want to get to this worm shaft down in here. So the next part is going to be taking out the worm gear and also the main gear shaft sprocket. So for this, it looks like we're gonna need a Phillips or a posi drive. And there's 2 screws here, one right there and one right there. So we're gonna go ahead and remove those. And again, with screws into carbon fiber frames, you want to be very, very cognizant or aware of not stripping out your frame, because once you've stripped it out, you're pretty much done. And it is supported by a bearing on the bottom, which is always great to see. We're going to go ahead and put our main gear shaft there, and it is ported as well, so that's also cool. And so what we're going to do now is we have to go to the other side. We've got to remove this little locking mechanism for the side plate, and it looks like there's just one little posi drive screw there, so we're going to remove that. And there may be a pin underneath, or a spring, I'm sorry, underneath this. So I'll put that aside there. So be careful. No, I didn't see one. So that makes things easy. All right, and so now we've got this little C-clip here. And so I'm going to try to reorient the C-clip to this way so that where it's facing kind of this little opening. And then I'll see if my little C-clip removal tool will work, but I kind of doubt it. And so I may have to use the little security bit. So here is my little C-clip removal tool. And yeah, as you can see, it's too big to fit into there. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my security bit. So this is the 2.6 size of the security bit. And you can get these out of, like, you know, these cheap screwdriver kits like this. So this is the 2.6, so right here. So if you guys can see that, 2.6, that's the size that you need. And if you're interested in getting one of these, I'll put a link in the description down below so you can find them quite easily. They're quite readily available on Amazon and pretty affordably priced. You don't need to have, you know, a nice Weehaw set, and I don't even know if Weehaw makes drivers for this security bit. All right, so what you do is you put the open prongs of the security bit on the 2 outside arms of the C-clip, and you push. And usually the C-clip will just pop off like that. And then I take some forceps and I come in here and see if I can't finagle that out. And in this instance, it looks like, oh, I can get it out. Nice. The reason why I was having trouble is because this front cover is on there. And this one, it looks like it's just, you know, held in by some tension. So you just pull on this side, pull upwards or pull outwards on this side gently, and then the front cover will come off just like that. Very, very easy to remove. Okay, so now that that spring clip is removed, this whole assembly should pop off. But what's happening is this little pawl is actually holding everything captive. And so before we try to remove this any further, we're going to go ahead and remove the pawl. And for that, you need a fairly large flathead. And so I'm looking for my flathead screwdriver. Here's one. I recommend you using a larger diameter one. And that's because, you know, if you put too much pressure on these pawl cap covers, they can kind of deform right here. And you'll see some evidence of somebody using a small screwdriver to remove that. Now, to pop this pawl out, P-A-W-L, by the way, since this has quite a bit of grease in there, it's probably kind of sticking. Oh, there, it's starting to pop out. So you can just kind of gently coax it out. And there is the pawl, which is a very ultra kind of machined pawl, which is kind of nice to see because that reduces the weight of the pawl itself. And then on this side, you can see how there's this pin here, and that's keyed to the worm gear itself. And so when you're able to pull this out, you can kind of push down on the gear, and that'll pop out this little pin. You can push the pin to the side and then remove the pin, and then that will free the worm gear to come out. And so you can see here, there is actually one washer right there on this side. And so what we want to do, And I don't know if it's going to be enough, but we're going to take this washer off. We're going to set it down right there. And I think that's the other opposing washer. And then we're going to push everything back together. So now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and put both washers on this side, because we want to push the line guide over this way because it's kind of moving over too close this way. So I'm kind of afraid that this might not be enough in terms of shims. And so if that's the case, let's get some measurements on this real quick. So the worm shaft shim inner diameter is going to be a 4, and the outer diameter is going to be a 6.5, and then thickness on these guys is going to be a 0.2 millimeter thickness. So right now what we've done is, because we have one already there that was existing and we're putting another one on here, this has now become a 0.4 millimeter shim on the main gear side, pushing your line guide that away. So hopefully this will be enough to push the line guide over towards the side plate or the brake side. And so now we're gonna work on reassembly. And so to do that, you just saw me put the 2 shims there. Now I'm gonna push the worm gear down if I can. When everything is loose, it becomes quite difficult to handle, especially when it's all greasy like this. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make this cover move into this side, the brake side, because it's keyed. And so that's why I'm having a little bit of trouble doing that. And I'm going to use my tweezers to kind of help see if I can't guide it in there. And there, we got it to seat. So that's good. Then you have to hold the worm shaft so that it's kind of proud this way so that you can push the worm gear down. Then we're going to take our pin, we're going to put it back right into the pin hole. And then once we've done that, we can push it so that it's equidistant on both sides. We're going to line up our worm gear, and then we're going to push down on the worm shaft so that it seats. And then, holding everything together still, we're going to come to this side. And you got to keep your finger on this side so that it doesn't fall out down. We're going to take our C-clip. We're going to put our C-clip back, and if it's right there, that's perfect. You can take a flat head this time. You don't need that security bit, and then just push. And I like to keep my thumb kind of over the C-clip so that in case it goes flying off, my thumb is kind of keeping it in place there. And so then we're going to see if we can rotate. And it does look like it rotates fine, smooth. And the reason why the line guide is not moving right now is because there's no pawl in there. So we're going to go ahead and reinsert the pawl. So we're going to go ahead and put that down. And then we can try to see if we can't turn things, press down a little bit, kind of gently. And then it should orient itself and then kind of seat down in there. And now when we turn, of course, you can see the line guide moving. So then we can go ahead and put the cap back on and make sure that you don't cross thread this. And because this is so open, you can kind of nicely hand tighten that up. And we're going to test now to see, did we fix that potential line lay issue? Of course, everything is like super slippery right now. And so I don't know if you guys can see this. It's a little bit better. I don't think it's absolutely perfect, but it's a little bit better. And without having other shims, I don't have the right size shim, so I'm gonna have to order some. But without having the right size shims, I can't really fine tune this more than what it already is right now. But if you guys want to see, so I'm trying to hold this as straight as possible so that from your perspective you can see the travel. There's full main gear side. And that is full brake side. So Yeah, and then, yeah. So it's not perfect. I think it actually needs to have another shim, if possible, on this side to kind of push the line guide just a hair more over to this way, over to the brake side. But it is much better than before, and so I'm gonna roll with this for now and see how it works out. And then, you know, if it still isn't completely fixed, then we'll go ahead and you know, do the breakdown again, and then kind of put in another shim, maybe a 0.1 millimeter shim, in order to push the line guide over this way just a tad more. But anyways, that's gonna do it for this. I gotta say, like, aside from, you know, this being an issue and this initially being kind of hard and heavy, and this, the drag clicker being a little bit on the rough side. Here's the little line guide, or the lever spring detent. I gotta say that the reel is it does cast very well in my experience, and so I'll do another, you know, casting follow-up video now that I've got this reel kind of more fixed. And yeah, for $35, $30 to $35, you know, if they can fix this, or if you guys want to take a shot at fixing it like I did in the video here, then the reel performs extremely well. I want to say that it performs up to the level of the Silver Feather. It's not quite as convenient to cast. The Silver Feather still is an easier reel to cast, meaning it doesn't backlash as much, but it can hang with the Silver Feather in terms of distance, at least for the 0.5 gram lure weight, and it's very, very close to the Cormorant at a fraction of the price. Now, it does feel quite a bit cheaper because it's so lightweight, and it is carbon fiber, reinforced plastic, and this matte finish doesn't really do much for the quality feeling. The brake dial itself is kind of that Dark Wolf Ultra style, which is very, very clicky and a little bit harder to turn because of the way that it's recessed in here, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. And then, you know, the brake, inner brake mechanism is a little bit odd to me. I'm not really that big a fan of that. But aside from that, you know, 30 to 35 bucks, I'm thinking that this is going to be the new budget BFS King, if they can get that fixed, and or if you are willing to fix the line lay issue, and or if you're lucky enough not to have one with a line lay issue. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video. If you like the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.